Welcome back, everybody. I'm still Gabby Snyder, and I'm still joined here by Costa Didymos. Sorry, I'm still working on my Greek pronunciation, but I
Perfect.
will. I will not have the opportunity to work on that in our next match, as we will be featuring Japan versus Peru in probably one of the most deciding matches that we're going to be featuring on stream today.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, because we've got a very interesting turn of events in this group three. Of course, we're going to go ahead, transition, just so you lovely people at home can get a bit of insight as well on the conditions between these countries. So, at the minute, we do have France, actually, which have been able to guarantee a win versus Mexico. It doesn't show the score there, but they have won 5-0 versus Mexico, which does, of course, propel them straight to the top 16, accompanied by that previous week versus Japan last week, of course. So France are definitely in. And now the real battle is going to be between Peru and Japan on who will be able to progress on to the final stage, which of course does mean, unfortunately, Mexico are out right now. They do not have, I don't think, a chance to be able to go ahead and progress. So let's go ahead, check out the current standings between these two countries, which, as it stands, Gabby, Peru are in the lead 4-3 to Japan's, like kind of dismay in this situation.
Yeah, but look at how close these matches have been. It looks like a majority of these games have gone to game three, which
Oh.
just goes to show you how close these trainers are in terms of talent and skill. And, looking at some of these Pokemon picks as well from across the board, there's a good, healthy amount of variance here. I think Zacian is still probably the Pokemon I see most frequently on the screen, but I see some Duskmane Necrozmas. I see your Kyogres, a Lunala, there's Eternatus over there. It's always really interesting to see the variety of teams here, and it looks like both Peru and Japan has had no shortage of creativity throughout this week too.
No doubt about that. I do quite like the Palkia picks as well from three of those trainers there. But something that we do have to re-emphasize, ladies and gents, just so you can understand how intense this final match is right now between these two countries. If Peru goes ahead and establishes this fifth and final win, they and France are the only teams progressing onto the top 16 stage, which of course will mean Japan and Mexico will be the unfortunate teams that are completely out. But if Japan are able to get this win on stream right now, they get the tie between themselves and Peru. They will have to go into week 3, and the only situation that they can actually pass would be if they could go ahead and win their final match against Mexico. I believe I may be wrong. Whilst, of course, Peru has to lose versus France, which have already progressed.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough matchup for both Jean-Paul and Shohei. So let's take a look at these trainers' teams. Representing Japan, Shohei Kimura, running a lovely Zacian team with Incineroar, Rillaboom, Landorus Incarnate, Urshifu, I believe that is the rapid single strike form, and Latias, also no strange to the international stage, having placed top 16 in the Oceania Internationals back in 2020, top 16 in the North American Internationals, and in 2017 being the runner-up of Japan Nationals. So also goes to show, his dedication, as I believe the Japanese players are unable to earn championship points from foreign events. So the fact that he has the dedication to travel all the way to the US and to Australia to get those placements is really quite the feat.
Yeah, definitely. Very strong accolades with that extra bit of effort like you just mentioned, Gabby. So I'm very intrigued to see such a strong trainer pilot this very, very interesting team, of course. This Latias, I do find quite interesting. It's in a situation where it does outspeed Landorus Incarnates. It has a very nice speed there, whilst also having so much options when it comes to its move pool. It has access to Icy Wind, Tailwind, Psyshock, even Ally Switch if you want to get a bit cheeky, accompanied by that Zacian there in anticipation of any sort of single target ground type moves going into that slot.
Yeah, and shout out to Latias as well, as I think Sword and Shield was the first year that you could actually run it holding the Soul Dew item. Unfortunately, that item did get a bit of a nerf, so I doubt we'll be seeing it today. But every time I see Latias, especially in Team Preview, I just think to myself and chuckle about how it used to be a very powerful Pokemon in previous formats, partially because of the Soul Dew, partially because of all the fantastic moves and fantastic coverage it gets access to. So we'll have to see what Shohei picked in order to provide the best support to the Zacian and the other Pokemon on his team.
Yeah, as we are going to be going over to their opponent for today, representing Peru, we do have Jean-Paul Lopez rocking with a Xerneas team, accompanied by the Incineroar, Regieleki, Landorus, Therian, Volcarona, and Amoonguss, and definitely no stranger to accomplishments on their side as well.
Yeah, top 4 in the second Players' Cup in 2020. When else would that be, really? Top 4 at the North American International Championships in 2009, and getting top 8 twice in the Latin American International Championships. And, also bringing a fairly interesting Xerneas team with Rage Powder access on that Volcarona and the Amoonguss, giving Xerneas 2 different play styles. 3, really, when you consider the presence of the Incineroar as well. Jean-Paul, while this is still a Xerneas team and you do have to play the will they won't they geomancy game in your head, by having access to both Fake Out and multiple Rage Powder users, I think that Jean-Paul has set up this Xerneas so that it will have the best opportunity it can have to go for that geomancy, despite it facing down a Zacian, which is really the restricted Pokemon that I think was introduced to stop Xerneas exactly in particular.
Yeah, exactly that. So, of course, very intriguing to see how this matchup is going to fare. Of course, we're going to go ahead and go straight into the footage. We are going to be observing it from Shohei's side of the field.
Oh.
So, Gabby, I see that you've noticed some items as well. Care to talk about your thoughts?
Yeah, that is a Rocky helmet on the Latias, which comes as quite the surprise. I think personally, I was expecting something more akin to the safety goggles, which are making an appearance on the Incineroar on Shohei's side of the field, but still a good indication that this Latias is meant to disrupt and possibly, act almost as a redirective Pokemon, maybe with something like Ally Switch, to encourage those physical hits so that the Pokemon dealing that damage will take damage of their own. Going into this game 1, though, I think that it's wise to leave that Latias behind, because it seems like it's such a niche Pokemon on that team. It definitely jumps out at you. And in situations like this, when you're not quite sure what your opponent's going to bring, or maybe you're not quite sure what mode of Xerneas they're going to be bringing to the game, you can leave Latias behind, and then once you have that confirmation of what your opponent's going to do, you can adapt in a future game.
As we're going to be seeing the leads right now of this game 1, Jean-Paul is going to be bringing the Incineroar and Xerneas, good old VGC lead of previous formats, versus Shohei's Landorus Incarnate and Incineroar of their own. And Gabby, I do believe I did have a bit of a sneak peek of the Incineroar's item there being those safety goggles, which mean, of course, that they do have a very good matchup versus powder moves on Jean-Paul's side.
Yeah, but unfortunately for Shohei, the opposing Incineroar intimidated first, which means it'll flinch first with that Fake Out as well, and give the Xerneas the opportunity to go straight for that Geomancy.
Wow, very raw, straight up Geomancy from Jean-Paul there. It is going to be outspeeding the Landorus Incarnate, which is quite interesting there as well. It may be, of course, indicating how both of these Pokemon are actually trained from their pilots, as we actually see Substitute coming out from Landorus Incarnate, not caring as well, saying, listen, I'm not going to go for the raw damage. I just want to try to set up this Substitute and put pressure over time.
And it's super interesting as well, having Shohei's perspective. He doesn't have any poison type attacks, and usually when you see Landorus Incarnate, you think that it's using sheer force to use moves like Earth Power and Sludge Bomb to deal super effective damage, but that Substitute, just all the more confirmation that that's not going to be something Shohei has access to in this game.
as the Xerneas goes for the ever so powerful Moonblast. Picks up the raw KO there. I'm not sure if the chip damage from the fake out may have actually contributed to that, as a lot of Incineroars do try to train, at least they previously did, to survive that Moonblast full frontal there, as the Earth Power is going to be dealing more than half of damage worth on that Amoonguss, which actually switched in for the Incineroar.
And that Zacian is going to be in a rough spot if it does decide to switch in here as a result. You know, I think Zacian should be bulky enough to take one attack from that Xerneas, but Jean-Paul could easily go for a protect on it and then follow up with a spore from the Amoonguss. Could also just go for Rage Powder to ensure that the Xerneas will get the opportunity to attack, as surprisingly the Earth Power from that Landorus was enough to bring Amoonguss down to below half its health and would most likely be a 2-hit knockout. So there's a lot of things in play this turn, and fortunately for Jean-Paul though, the Xerneas is still in a strong spot to go on the offensive. You just have to wonder, you know, what other Pokemon does Jean-Paul have in the back of his party, and if one of those is something like the Landorus Therian or maybe even the Incineroar, do you bring that Pokemon back out onto the field to go for that Intimidate, use the Regenerator to get some of Amoonguss's health back, like play it that sort of game, or do you just go for Rage Powder attack and just keep that offense up?
As we're actually not going to be seeing any sort of switches. The Landorus opts to go for that Protect, that does not want to get its substitute broken just yet, as Amoonguss goes for the Rage Powder. It'll be able to redirect the Zacian's move right now, as, ooh, Moonblast, oh, sorry, apologies, Dazzling Gleam does come out. It will not be able to break that substitute there. It will, of course, deal a bit of chip damage over time, but Jean-Paul is quite enjoying his situation here, even though the Amoonguss has gone down though, Gabby, so that redirecting Mushroom is out for the count, but of course this does leave up the slot to bring in the Incineroar.
Yeah, an interesting choice from Shohei there to keep that substitute active on the field. I think that Shohei knows once the substitute is gone that Landorus Incarnate is going to be knocked out as well. So by keeping it around for this turn, you don't have to worry about the flinch necessarily from the Incineroar, and you will have the opportunity to get one attack in guaranteed, most likely that Earth Power looking to pick up that knockout.
Ooh, as of course the Zacian did want to protect there, and it avoided getting flinched. But the Xerneas immediately on the offensive goes for the Dazzling Gleam here, but this may not be the best for Jean-Paul's Incineroar, as because Shohei was able to so well actually protect and substitute their Landorus. I was gonna say they could actually pick up a KO here, but they just opted to go for a second substitute.
You know, I think that keeping this Landorus on the field is an important part of Shohei's strategy. So if you know that there's only going to be one attack in the form of Dazzling Gleam, why not go for a second substitute?
Yeah.
You then have it available for you this turn when Xerneas is still going to be moving faster, but unlike the previous turn, you don't have to worry about Fake Out getting a flinch and stopping your momentum anymore. So Shohei, by doing so, has given him the opportunity to connect a Behemoth Blade and the Earth Power possibly into that Xerneas if he needs that little extra chip to guarantee a knockout. Worst case scenario, Earth Power just gets thrown into Volcarona apparently, and that is perfectly fine as well.
So Jean-Paul actually opting to have 3 supportive casts next to this Xerneas every single time in order to try to push through all of Shohei's Pokemon, as they did opt to go for the Protect right there. The Zacian is going to fail, as well as the Landorus are both going to fail to try to target down that slot there. So Jean-Paul all of a sudden has redirection yet again on their side of the field.
Yeah, Volcarona is one of those super interesting Pokemon that has only made an appearance now that we're in Series 10, and it's very understandable why. In this situation in particular, it can go for a Rage Powder and force Zacian to attack it, and then with the ability Flame Body has a significant chance of burning the Zacian, which will completely destroy its attacking power. So no redirection though, so Volcarona might just be going on the offensive.
Ooh, as the Zacian goes for the Behemoth Blade, targets down the Xerneas, and will not pick up the KO thanks to that Intimidate. These bulky Xerneases being ever so common here, whilst the Zacian in turn gets absolutely decimated by that Volcarona's Heat Wave there. So Jean-Paul looking good right now in their situation, but the Xerneas, through that double up from Shohei's Landorus Earth Power, that does finally fall, but at what cost? It all depends right now on Shohei's final Pokemon and what they could try to do against Jean-Paul's.
Well, it's going to be Urshifu, and unfortunately for Urshifu, Flame Body is just as much of a deterrent for it attacking into that Volcarona as the Zacian. So even though Jean-Paul is down to his last 3 Pokemon, and they're not really the offensive Pokemon on the team, he still has plenty of momentum to carry him forward through this Urshifu. We do have the benefit of knowing that the Urshifu is holding a Choice Scarf here on Shohei's side of the field, which means he's going to have to pick an attack in order to use for the rest of this game, and that's really difficult to lock into. There's still the Amoonguss in back, and if you don't have an ability to hit these Pokemon for super effective damage, you might not be able to do enough damage at all.
Ooh, as the Fake Out does go into the Urshifu slot there, and we see a Quiver Dance set up from Jean-Paul's side, seeing, of course, that these are their final 2 Pokemon there, and just trying to set up in this scenario makes a lot of sense. You want to try to threaten down both of these Pokemon, essentially, maybe with a double Heat Wave, but it's very tough with this Urshifu on the field.
It is, and this is also why I think Volcarona has started to pick up in popularity for this latter part of Series 10, is the access to Quiver Dance means it's not just a supportive Pokemon. It's able to go on the offensive and even take super effective hits like the, I believe, Rock Throw from that Urshifu into the Volcarona quite comfortably. It's a fantastic Pokemon to have in a situation like this when you're down to your last 2 Pokemon and you need that little bit of speed or that little bit of offense from a Quiver Dance in order to make a difference. And Jean-Paul just very confidently saving Volcarona for last as a result. I think going into game 2, Shohei definitely has to be a little bit more cautious around the Xerneas, which is strange because he really did play that game as best as he could up until the end. It's just, that's just how powerful Geomancy is. You know, you don't have 5 or 6 turns to try and figure out your opponent's strategy and, you know, maneuver around it so that you can get that double hit to secure the KO. You have to find that as quickly as possible because that chip damage, thanks to Geomancy, just becomes enough to KO outright.
Yeah, and I think I find it quite interesting, that Rock Tomb as an option there for Urshifu to try to slow down your opponent's speed, whilst of course threatening that Rock typing there is very interesting, but like you said, maybe not the best to bring in that scenario, given the fact that the Xerneas has so much support. It has 2 Rage Powders, and it has a Fake Out in the form of that Incineroar, so very intriguing and very interesting to actually see going into this game 2 that we're going to go ahead and transition to right now to see how Jean-Paul is going to essentially try to push through and get that additional win to secure that win for Peru to push him straight into top 16, or from Shohei's side to try to force a game 3.
Knowing that the Urshifu is carrying Choice Scarf, I don't think it's necessarily a poor Pokemon to bring in this matchup. I think it's just a poor Pokemon to bring at the end of the game. You do have to be very cautious about a Xerneas lead, but if you think that going into game 2, your opponent isn't going to lead Xerneas, and instead maybe the Volcarona plus a Fake Out, you know, it could be helpful to have that Choice Scarf. Their Shifu could be fast enough to get some big damage down onto the field, then you rotate it out, and then you send it back in once the Xerneas has been dealt with, and it can close combat that Incineroar for an easy knockout. You know, it's a good Pokemon to have with Choice Scarf. It helps out a lot more, though, in other matchups, but still, you know, I don't think it was necessarily the Rock Tomb itself or the Urshifu itself that ran into trouble. It was more just the fact that it was locked into an attack with that Choice Scarf and really came onto the field too late.
Yeah, I'll completely agree with that, as we're going to be seeing Jean-Paul change it up a bit. Instead of opting with that Xerneas, going to be bringing that Volcarona, whilst on Shohei's side, we see another adaptation too. We see actually the Zacian and Rillaboom lead. So this time round, Shohei having access to Fake Out, even though the Intrepid Sword will be boosting the Zacian to +1, that Intimidate will be bringing it back down to neutral from that Incineroar.
And 2 fire-type Pokemon as well, staring across the Zacian and the Rillaboom. So Shohei almost immediately put on the back foot, and Jean-Paul given the opportunity to go for a Quiver Dance right off the bat, if that's something he thinks will be helpful for that Volcarona. I would definitely say go for it at this point, because similar to how you play the Xerneas, getting the speed boost plus a special attack boost is so important in these matchups, especially against the Zacian. You know, it's likely that after a single speed boost, the Volcarona would be able to outspeed the Zacian, and as a result, just knock it out immediately. So even though it's not the Xerneas, Jean-Paul still has a great lead, and still most likely has that Xerneas in the back as a result as well.
Yeah, Jean-Paul may have been expecting this adaptation from Shohei. No Flame Body activation there to note, whilst we do see the Incineroar on Jean-Paul's side not actually even going for that Fake Out, just goes for that parting shot into what was the Zacian slot, allowing Jean-Paul to bring that new Pokemon in. Essentially, it may even be the Xerneas, but we actually see an Amoonguss. So Jean-Paul, honestly, in my opinion, just seeming to be having that advantage and momentum from game 1 is just pushing forwards with bringing the correct Pokemon for the situation.
Yeah, and you have to wonder how exactly Shohei is going to maneuver his way through this with the Rillaboom in particular. I think Incineroar is pretty free to go for a Fake Out or go for a Flare Blitz into that Amoonguss, but Rillaboom's going to have to switch out almost immediately, and if you go for something like a U-turn, you run the risk of taking damage, but fortunately it looks like Volcarona's happy to get a Quiver Dance in.
No, it definitely is, as the Rillaboom goes for a U-turn, and something worth to note as well, the Amoonguss didn't go for the Rage Powder there. It makes a lot of sense. The Rillaboom will not have any sort of moves redirected, and if Jean-Paul is aware of these potential safety goggles on the Incin, that would be the exact same scenario too, as the Amoonguss goes for the Spore into that Rillaboom's U-turn, which is now, guess what? And Landorus Incarnate, as we actually see Raw Gabby coming out from this Incineroar. Oh my lord, getting rid of the Quiver Dance boost that the Volcarona honestly really loved there. But then again, we do have Incineroar now switched in.
So that roar on the Incineroar changes so many things about this matchup for Shohei, because that gives him an out against the Xerneas. We know that the Incineroar can take a single Moonblast from Xerneas after it has gotten the Geomancy boost, and being able to force the Xerneas off the field means that Geomancy will not be able to get set up a second time. That Power Herb item is so critical so that it is only a one-turn attack, and just the pressure that this Incineroar has as a result on Shohei's side of the field is huge, and he has to be very careful to keep it safe, especially as Xerneas now finally makes an appearance.
Oh, this is very good for Jean-Paul right now, as a lot of momentum going for this side of the field. They didn't even opt to go for Fake Out there, actually, onto the Incineroar, which they did have access to. They decided to instead go for the parting shot into the Landorus, try to reduce its damage output, get that pivot in for Jean-Paul's side, which from what it looks like is now going to be switching into either of the Rage Powder users. In this case, Volcarona can even threaten that Quiver Dance going, as Shohei's Incineroar hasn't moved as of yet, but it just has right now. Went for the parting shot of its own. So Shohei trying to recycle their Pokemon as well and try to get that damage, so, you know, that highly threatened Pokemon which can actually damage or try to disrupt Jean-Paul's strategy, because so far Jean-Paul, I feel like, has just been adapting very well and has been that one step ahead of Shohei.
Even by sending in the Volcarona here, I think that Jean-Paul has put Shohei in an unfortunate position where he has to get the Zacian on the field, because Zacian, again, is one of the best Pokemon that can threaten that Volcarona, knowing that he did pick the parting shot move. But then Volcarona can go for a Rage Powder, force Zacian to attack into the Volcarona, and then possibly burn that Zacian as well. In the meantime, that Landorus is just stuck on the field, asleep for Shohei, and sure, he could switch in that Incineroar to that spot, but he could potentially be taking some damage as a result. So Jean-Paul has a interesting decision in the sense that I think you Rage Powder to be safe and go for the Geomancy also to be safe, but just the threat of Xerneas is enough alone to keep Jean-Paul's strategy going here.
It really is, as being able to switch it out means that you can better utilize it in future turns, as the Incineroar does switch in now, and the Landorus from Shohei's side is going to be switching out for Shohei's own Incineroar. A lot of, like pivoting Pokemon, whether that be from parting shots or hard switches from both these trainers, they needed to try to reposition as best as possible, and right now we do see the Behemoth Blade coming out from the Zacian, goes into what was the Xerneas, but now is that Incineroar whilst at neutral, whilst the Volcarona is just going to start setting up right here. And Gabby, this is what I love about the 4 Pokemon Jean-Paul is using. You have all of the disruption, whether that be Fake Out or Redirection, and then you've got the setup Pokemon, both being the Xerneas and the Volcarona in this situation.
Yeah, honestly, Volcarona in this matchup, given the Pokemon that Shohei has brought, is probably just as powerful as the Xerneas. Not in a literal sense, I still think that Geomancy at any point in time can easily end this game. But it has fantastic typing, it has enough redirection, it has the threat of a burn if you connect an attack with it, and it also has the ability to Heat Wave and deal tremendous damage to 3 out of 4 of Shohei's Pokemon. So Jean-Paul correctly identifying that fact and matching Shohei's slow game with all the switching and the flinches and the intimidates, and really doing all that just to give the Volcarona a chance to shine.
Oh, very unfortunate miss there of the Heat Wave at +1, even to an AV Rillaboom would have dealt so much damage onto it. So Jean-Paul, I think in the previous game did also perhaps miss a Heat Wave. So far, not the best of luck for themselves, even though they're positioning themselves very, very well. But then again, they do still have that pressure, and that Flame Body is just a very, very awkward ability for any sort of contact moves such as Fake Out that may come out from like a Rillaboom.
And I'm surprised that the Rillaboom was an adjustment that Shohei made going into this game too, as Rillaboom's really going to struggle to find damage against the Incineroar and the Volcarona. These flinches will certainly help him find some space, but again, how much space is it really going to be at the end of it when a single Heat Wave can take you down?
Oh, exactly, as there was no Flame Body activation. Their Flare Blitz dealt so much damage onto the Volcarona, and we saw the Throat Chop from Jean-Paul's Incineroar connecting onto Shohei's, of course, before it moved. So if, of course, Shohei's Incineroar opted to go for Parting Shot there, it would have been blocked, but opting to go for Flare Blitz and deal so much damage onto Volcarona is definitely what Shohei should be doing, and he's done so well right now.
Yeah, and removing Parting Shot as well removes one of Shohei's opportunities to weaken the Volcarona or the Incineroar and try and influence another switch. But that all being said, I don't think you do switch here. Oh, that is unfortunate.
Lord. Oh my lord, second Heat Wave miss in a row. You hate to see it, as the U-turn will now go out from the Rillaboom into Jean-Paul's Incineroar, getting that pivot action going. Very unfortunate right there. The Volcarona definitely not wearing its wise glasses or even accurate glasses at this point. As it's, even though it does have that Quiver Dance boost going, it's just not hitting the correct target that it's trying to aim for. But the Parting Shot though from Jean-Paul's Incineroar is going to be able to bring this Zacian back down to neutral now.
It is, and it's also going to give Jean-Paul the opportunity to send in the Amoonguss if that Pokemon is still available in his party. And by sending in Amoonguss, he's putting the Zacian in a really interesting position where he can still redirect something like a Geomancy from that Xerneas now that the Volcarona has been knocked out by the Flare Blitz, Or Amoonguss could just go for a Spore into that Zacian as well and put it to sleep and try and find Xerneas an opportunity to attack. It is very unfortunate that the Volcarona did miss those 2 heat waves, as I think those were absolutely critical, and had either of them connected, that would have been a knockout on that Rillaboom, thanks to the help of Quiver Dance, even through the Assault Vest. But just a really, really unfortunate turn of events for Jean-Paul.
Yeah, definitely. But of course, Jean-Paul does have the Xerneas and Amoonguss paired up next to each other right now. This is definitely what you want if you are Jean-Paul. You want to try to go ahead and guarantee that setup, even though you have lost one of your pivoting markers for your strategy. Over on Shohei's side, you got to try to go ahead and focus and essentially adapt to whatever threat this Amoonguss can go for, as there's no Rage Powder. But there's a Zacian's Behemoth Blade. Oh my lord. But we were all expecting it to go into Xerneas, but no, it does not. That invisible Rage Powder appeared from nowhere, as the Moonblast is actually coming out from the Xerneas, picks up the KO onto the Incineroar. Gabby, oh my lord. Spore comes out, and this Zacian is completely put to sleep.
So great information that Jean-Paul was able to figure out, most likely by how much damage Moonblast did prior to or after Geomancy in game 1, knowing that it would be able to secure the knockout on this Incineroar in game 2, and open up enough of an opportunity for that Amoonguss to be put to sleep. I think it's very interesting that Shohei targeted the Amoonguss outright. I think normally in a situation like this, unless you're worried about the Xerneas protecting, you still target down the Xerneas and you just let the redirection happen. But Xerneas now more than free to go for the Geomancy. Finally, after waiting for so long, once one more turn of Fake Out has been powered through.
Yeah, exactly that. As like you said, the Fake Out is now gone ahead and has flinched that Xerneas, giving the Zacian maybe a bit more of a chance to wake up here. But as we had seen previously, the fact that the Zacian's damage output has been able to be now reduced, I think, to -1, it's not going to be able to pick up a KO onto Xerneas unless, of course, it does switch out here.
Yeah, and you have to wonder if that's something Shohei's going to go for, as it's definitely a risk for that Zacian, but it looks like it remains on the field, and not only that, it stays asleep.
Yeah, stays asleep there, as the Xerneas is going to go ahead and get its long-sorted and awaited Geomancy boost going, thanks to that Power Herb as well interaction, allowing that 2-turn boosting move all clumped up into one there, threatening so much damage and speed. This is what Jean-Paul wants. This is their main strategy going into this, as high horsepower comes out from Rillaboom, but it's not quite enough at all to pick up any sort of KOs onto the Incineroar, but it is quite enough to enable that Citrus Berry recovery on it.
And the Incineroar has almost more health than I believe it started that turn off with, which is absolutely unfortunate for Shohei as well. He does have one out here, which is that the Xerneas is unable to secure a knockout on Zacian, which it shouldn't. I mean, Zacian still will take, neutral damage from those fairy type attacks, but or resisted damage from those fairy type attacks. But if Zacian is unable to wake up, the Incineroar's Flare Blitz would be more than enough to knock it out after the attack from the Xerneas, and as a result, I think Shohei will be put in a situation where he will not be able to win the game. It really comes down to whether or not he wakes up and is able to knock out the Xerneas at this point in time, and I think you just have to go for it. As much as you want to predict like a Protect or something else, I don't think you have that luxury anymore.
No, I completely agree. You don't. You have to be hoping for maybe some sort of critical hit through the Xerneas, enough of course to pick it up if it doesn't protect, but it does, Gabby, and Jean-Paul does not want to leave anything to any sort of risk, as it does actually move the Zacian, but oh my lord, that is pitiful damage. I think that may have been a Sacred Sword into the Amoonguss slot, which not only resists, it was at -1 of its attack. That Zacian, as a high horsepower, tried to connect into the same slot too, so at least Shohei got the slot correct. But at this point, it's, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to be able to bring this back, honestly.
It all depends on what Xerneas goes for this turn, and if Xerneas is able to find a KO on the Rillaboom. You know, I think that Shohei is making a very smart decision here to switch out the Zacian to get rid of the attack drop and get the +1 back from Intrepid Sword. But the Rillaboom, you know, is not going to be able to knock out the Xerneas, and Moonblast will certainly be able to knock out that Rillaboom, except for the Assault Vest. So there's a little bit of an opening here, but it's not much.
No, it's not much, but I would have maybe expected maybe a sort of drum beating there that could have at least dealt a bit more damage. Of course, the U-turn is quite crucial to try to get that pivot action going, but you still have to deal with a Rage Pouting Amoonguss, and Zacian cannot go past that right now, can't bypass it. You have to be forced to attack it. So in this scenario, I think Jean-Paul could easily bring that Incineroar back in, even if for whatever reason somehow the Amoonguss does go down.
Yeah, I'm trying to puzzle through it myself, actually. I mean, I like to see that Shohei's taking the time here to puzzle through this situation as well, since even though he only has one Pokemon he can switch to, I think that you really have to take every second given to you in this position to try and figure things out. You know, the fortunate thing about the Zacian's position on the field right now is that it is at full health, which will mean that it will get the opportunity to attack something this turn. Maybe it won't get to attack with as much damage as it would like, but certainly if the Landorus decides to wake up and is able to take an attack as well, Behemoth Blade plus a Earth Power should be enough to pick up the KO on that Amoonguss. And you know, if you do target the Xerneas here, which it looks like Shohei is considering, then you do cover yourself against the Incineroar switch in for the Amoonguss spot as well. You know, you either say, okay, you're going to switch and intimidate, or you're going to Rage Powder, at which point I will be redirected regardless.
Yeah, as the Xerneas nearly picks up the KO with a Dazzling Gleam onto the Landorus, but more importantly does deal that chip damage onto the Zacian. But does the Behemoth Blade pick up the KO? Yes, it does, from that range. So Jean-Paul will now be left with their last two Pokemon, that being the Xerneas and the Incineroar. And we have a wake up actually from this Landorus, which of course did survive, did deal a bit of damage there, but we do have to remember this Geomancy does mean that the Xerneas is at +2 of its special defense as well.
Yeah, and it's also at +2 of its speed, which means it will get the opportunity to go for a second Dazzling Gleam prior to any of these other Pokemon on the field moving. So even if Shohei double protects this turn to stop the threat of Fake Out from flinching one of his Pokemon, that Xerneas will still have the opportunity to attack. One thing Shohei could consider doing here, though, is going for the Protect on the Landorus and attacking with that Zacian regardless in hopes of catching that Xerneas off guard, but that doesn't appear to be the case.
No, it does not. Zacian goes for the Protect, and I think Incineroar correctly follows suit there. You want to try to negate that Fake Out priority there from flinching one of two of your Pokemon, as the Xerneas is just going to try to go ahead and get an attack off, and it's going to fail to do so with that Dazzling Gleam. So I think Shohei actually has a good shot in bringing this back based on which Pokemon they decide to switch out right now, because Zacian needs to go back up to its +1, doesn't it?
It does, and Rillaboom, if it's allowed to remain on the field, would get access to a second Fake Out. But unfortunately, it looks like it's the Landorus that switches out, which means Zacian could go for the Behemoth Blade finally here against the Xerneas. This could be that turn.
Oh, here we go. It's all going to come down to it, ladies and gentlemen. We see timer being initiated as well. Can this Behemoth Blade knock out the Xerneas and the Landorus, bring it back versus this Incineroar? Will it survive? And it does not. Oh my lord, Gabby. This looks like it's going to be a game 3.
It took a very long time to get here as well. Incineroar getting the opportunity to Flare Blitz the Zacian for the knockout, and I believe that means we are down to Incineroar versus Incineroar versus Landorus, excuse me, on Shohei's side of the field. And we've seen that Earth Power already do so much damage. So you're absolutely right. Barring any shenanigans from this Incineroar, with 7 HP to spare, Shohei has found his way into a game 3.
Wow, what a masterclass from Shohei during this mid to end game there. Of course, quite unfortunate, we have to relate back to those heatwave misses,
Yes.
as the Rillaboom would not still be present. Let's not lie, people. But, of course, Shohei took complete advantage of that. They played it exceptionally well, and honestly, I was a bit doubtful of that Landorus Incarnate switch out, but you know what? Shohei knows what they're doing, and they're doing it very, very well.
It was a tough call to make, and I think it was definitely one that he would not have been comfortable with making unless he had the confidence in this team and in this matchup in particular. You know, I think the benefit of being a player active at least since 2017 is that you've been active in multiple formats where these Protect the Xerneas teams have been very popular, and there is a certain amount of comfort that comes from playing with a Xerneas team like this, because even though Jean-Paul has tried to mix up the formula in multiple different ways, you know, by bringing that Volcarona and having the Quiver Dance access in particular, at the end of the day and at the end of this game, it did ultimately come down to, okay, I only have the Xerneas left, I only have the Incineroar to protect the Xerneas. Like, you know, let's sort of play through this end game that you know, we've seen play out many times before. So I think that it just goes to show that Shohei has fantastic experience, but you're absolutely right. You know, he wouldn't have been given the opportunity to get to this end game if it wasn't for those heatwave misses. And I think when you keep that in account, you have to ask yourself, going into game 3, is it even worth it to bring that Rillaboom, knowing that it was 2 turns away from destruction very early on in this game?
Yeah, definitely. And something worth noting very quickly there at the end of the game, we saw the timer was activated, and it actually looked like Jean-Paul could have been a couple of turns away from winning. If he had, for example, a Protect for whatever reason on the Incineroar, it would have actually won it there, and it would have gone through. So very, very close. Talk about cliffhanging situation right now for Shohei, trying to force Japan's life to extend in this World Cup. I am so excited and hyped for this final game 3. So we're gonna go ahead, transition straight through, and oh my lord, Gabby, there must be so much pressure going through both of these players right now.
I know. I mean, again, this is that one game that can keep Japan alive for the tournament. And knowing that it comes down to game 3, I think, regardless of what happens in this game, you know that both these countries and both these trainers in particular really brought their all. So I cannot wait to see how this is going to shake up. I think that if I were in Shohei's position here, I would hesitate before bringing that Rillaboom. It just was such a liability in that game too. And I think you have to be very confident with your game plan in regards to the Volcarona if that is a decision you're going to make. Fortunately, Shohei does have access to both the Incineroar and the Landorus though, and we've seen both those Pokemon deal big amounts of damage to that Volcarona. So if that's something that you're comfortable in relying on those 2 Pokemon at first until the Volcarona is gone, and then you bring in the Rillaboom, that certainly is an option, but it's such a tough call to make. Whereas if you're in Jean-Paul's position, I think you still bring the same 4 Pokemon. You still rely on that Volcarona early, but maybe if you notice your opponent mixing things up, you make a quick pivot into the Xerneas and go for a Geomancy early, which, you know, Jean-Paul did have the opportunity to go for a couple of times in that game too. So it's going to be down to the wire, down to the absolute wire once again.
Exactly that, as we see Jean-Paul bring the same lead that in retrospect kind of worked for them but kind of did not as game 2, whilst over on Shohei's side we do see the Landorus Incarnate and Rillaboom as a lead. So you got a bit of fake out pressure from this Rillaboom side, and depending on what move you have on Landorus, maybe you have an option to try to threaten that Volcarona down.
I mean, we've seen the Landorus's moves, and we know that it is only going to be the Earth power that it has for the attack, unfortunately. But again, that'll do some fantastic damage to both these 2 Pokemon. And as long as you have the fake out support with Rillaboom here, I think that you can risk going for maybe 1 attack with it before you have to start worrying about more of the slow play or more of the adjustment side of this matchup.
Yeah, definitely, as we are going to be actually seeing the Landorus switch out now on Shohei's side for the Incineroar. You want to be able to have that fake out access for the subsequent turn after this, whilst also maybe getting a bit of an Intimidate drop onto that Incineroar on Jean Paul's side if for whatever reason it tried to opt to go for that Flare Blitz. Oh my lord, here we go. The first Flame Body activation. I felt like Shohei was counting their stars, being able to avoid that in the previous 2 games, but unfortunately for them, they're not able to do so in this turn.
That is unfortunate, but that is how the cookie crumbles, so to speak. Or maybe that is how the flame body activates. It's tough to say which would be more apt in this situation. But you know, Shohei still has the Rillaboom available to him to act as a fake out user, and given what happened in game 2, I think that's really going to be the value that Rillaboom brings, in addition to that grassy terrain to help keep Pokemon healthy. I don't think you necessarily rely on the high horsepowers that we saw Shohei going for in this game 2. Maybe for a little bit of additional chip so that when the Landorus takes the field you can deal damage to it, but I think that Rillaboom's most utility is going to be from flinching and U-turning and doing all those things that the revolving door of Pokemon likes to do.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I think that's what Rillaboom's role has been rendered down to now. You just want to try to get that more supportive action from itself. Fake out, U-turn, like you said. Essentially take those hits, as the Incineroar from Jean Paul's side will be, of course, moving first, like it always has been during this set, into Shohei's with the parting shot, allowing Jean Paul to go ahead and get that free switch in right now. I do feel like the Volcarona does have options. It could just easily go for that Quiver Dance here right now and try to make sure that it's in a good enough position to threaten any Zacian or the Rillaboom from coming back in, and even this Landorus, to be honest, because it dealt so much damage with one of its previous heat waves. But no, it's just gone for the Protect right here, correctly anticipating any sort of interaction here.
I wonder if the Volcarona is going to Quiver Dance this turn and the Xerneas is going to switch out for Jean Paul, or I wonder if he's going to go for the early Geomancy. I think that he's seen enough of Shohei's team to make the assumption that the Zacian is the last Pokemon in the back, and I think that if that is the prediction that you're making in this situation in particular, I think you go for the early Geomancy and rely on the Xerneas to sort of be like the early attacker for your team, and then you save the Incineroar in the back for later on in the game once the Zacian does make an appearance.
Yeah, as we're actually going to see the Landorus go for the Protect right now. No sort of switches, actually, as the Xerneas wants to try to ensure that KO onto it. We see a double up there. So that was a Moonblast plus Heat Wave interaction, hoping to finally get rid of it. So very well played from Shohei there, anticipating that focus on the Landorus, as we do know that it covers quite a lot with that Earth Power access, of course, boosted by the Life Orb. Sheer Force is a big threat to Jean Paul's Incineroar, so Shohei right now has been able to get that very free switch in of the Zacian.
Yeah, that's very, very fortunate for Shohei, and it does make you wonder how Jean Paul is going to adjust. You know, I think that the option to go for a Rage Powder and Geomancy is still ever present on the field, and knowing that the Zacian was the pivot here, I think you go for that and you hope that Flame Body gets the burn on the Zacian, so Xerneas has a better matchup here. But instead it looks like Jean Paul more than comfortable to just go for the Intimidate and again continue to rely on this Volcarona as a attacker. So I'm very curious to see what move it picked and whether or not a possible Heat Wave is going to be enough to connect.
Oh, this may be a very susceptible situation if the Earth Power decided to go into that Incineroar slot from Shohei, as no, it did not. It was trying to focus down on the Volcarona slot there. So Shohei biting the bait, essentially, of a Jean Paul's play there. I did feel like there may have been a read even that Shohei could have gone for, but at this point, they may have not wanted to risk it just yet.
It's tough. I mean, on the one hand, I think that Shohei is going to have to take those risks in order to get the advantage, because we've seen these games go down to the wire and rely on luck ultimately in order to turn to his favor between game 1 and game 2. And if you're going to try and mix things up, I think taking that risk is how you basically ensure that you don't have to wait for those rolls in your favor.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you're a Zacian staring down 2 fire-type Pokemon that are very comfortable on the field staring you down. I just wonder how much risk can you feasibly take in this situation.
Yeah, exactly that, as Jean-Paul has put out all the stops right now. As the Sacred Sword, though, does deal a lot of damage at neutral, proccing the Citrus Berry on that Incineroar, of course. We saw that Shohei's Incineroar will not be able to move due to that Fake Out, which means, of course, Jean-Paul is very free to go for that Quiver Dance, being able to bring itself up to +1 of speed, special attack, and special defense, which, of course, means it may be threatening this Zacian right now.
I think May is being very kind, Costa. I think this Volcarona is definitely threatening the Zacian right now, and it may take the opportunity to go for a Protect this turn just so that it doesn't have to worry about Fake Out from the Incineroar. But still, when that Volcarona is allowed to attack, you know that it is going to be fishing for one of those Heat Waves, which means that Shohei's opportunity to make a big play, I think, are slowly starting to run out, as he's being slowly forced back into the position he was in game 2 to rely on Heat Wave missing. Now, to his advantage, he does still have the Incineroar on the field, and Incineroar's Flare Blitz is going to be a 2-hit knockout to that Volcarona. But I think my question is that will he get the opportunity to get those 2 hits in on the Volcarona, or will Jean-Paul take this opportunity to send in a Pokemon that would be a bit more supportive for the Volcarona itself?
Yeah, being that maybe sponge-like mushroom, a Moondist there, as actually the Volcarona opts to go for Protect there. A Moondist actually potentially more than comfortable due to those Intimidate drops to take this hit, as it just barely scratches over half of HP's worth. And if there was a double up there of any sorts from the Incineroar, that could have been quite detrimental, and we may have even seen the Amoongus leave there. But no, the focus is still trying to get rid of that Volcarona.
It is, and that just goes to show you how much pressure this Volcarona has on the field, and he has more of an opportunity to go for that pressure. You know, Shohei is once again in this position where, you know, the Amoongus can Rage Powder, the Amoongus can Spore, the Amoongus can switch out, and another Intimidate can take the field. These Pokemon don't exist just to support that Xerneas. They exist to support the Volcarona as well, and the Volcarona is doing a fine job of bringing this game forward.
It really is, and I think Jean-Paul has a plethora of options that they could easily go for, as we do see the Heat Wave coming out right there, hoping to catch out the Zacian, but no, it had opted to go instead for the Protect. Incineroar now slow playing it itself, but more importantly, finally reducing the damage output of this Volcarona. Now it's gone for the parting shot into it, means that the Volcarona is now back to neutral of its special attack, whilst Shohei will have the option to go for Landorus Incarnate here, I'm expecting at least, as makes a lot of sense. You want to try to focus down and at least threaten whatever is on the board on Jean-Paul's side.
And Landorus should be able to threaten those Pokemon if it decides to remain around on the field, as Earth Power is still a very powerful attack. May even threaten a knockout on that Incineroar outright, though it's tough to say based off the damage rolls we've seen in the set. I think that getting the Landorus onto the field is certainly the first step for Shohei to, again, make that big play and try and get things in his favor. Removing the Zacian is the second part. But will that be enough is still really tough to say at this early on.
Yeah, well, I mean, talk about Zacian is very scared in this scenario. It wants to have a reset of its stages, henceforth why Incineroar decided to tag itself in, as Volcarona now goes for the Heat Wave, but of course, due to that lower damage output, it's not able to do enough. But guess what does? That Earth Power, which picks up the KO from the Landorus Incarnate, and finally opens up a door for Shohei right now to be able to establish that damage and those KOs they so desperately need. Whilst now the Incineroar is on the field, ladies and gents, it does have the Fake Out pressure to slow down Jean-Paul's game plan.
It has Fake Out pressure. It also has the ability to double into that Volcarona outright with an attack plus the Landorus to secure the knockout. I think that if I were in Shohei's shoes, knowing that I had the Zacian in the back, knowing that Jean-Paul is down to 3 Pokemon remaining, I think you go for that knockout on the Volcarona. Geomancy is not as big of a threat once your Zacian is on the field at full health against the Xerneas when it can't be redirected. And as tempting as it may be to try and get the Zacian out on the field to find it, you have to wonder if he's going to be punished for this switch with an attack from that Volcarona.
That may be the case. Let's hope not. If you are supporting Shohei's side of the field, Zacian is now on the battlefield with +1 of its Intrepid Sword, but no punish, at least for now, as the Volcarona opts to go for that Protect. The Incineroar actually trying to go for the Fake Out to shut it down, but guess what has been forgotten on this side, Gabby? We see that Xerneas going ahead and getting its Geomancy boost right now to try to threaten this Incineroar and anything that wants to switch in for it.
Yep, that is absolutely correct. And honestly, what I'm curious to see here is, now that the Zacian is out on the field, how Jean-Paul is going to respond. I think that you just go on the offense. You know, I keep saying this, and it's interesting that these trainers are still playing slow, you know, still switching things around, still keeping their eye on the momentum. But knowing that the Xerneas has gotten the Geomancy boost up on Jean-Paul's side of the field means that he's not going to be able to switch as much to match that slower style of play. And I think this is where you stop that slower style play and you start capitalizing on damage. And if Shohei is caught by a Dazzling Gleam or a Moonblast this turn from that Xerneas with the switch that he locked in, that could be very costly.
It really can be, as the Xerneas goes for the Moonblast, hoping to pick up a KO. Oh, it's not able to do so, but I would actually... Wow, no Rage Powder. Very brave from Jean-Paul, as I do think the Zacian did try to target down the Xerneas.
Behemoth Blade.
Oh my lord, let's get ready for it. It goes, it connects, and does it pick up the KO? It does! And what a turn of events, ladies and gents. The Zacian has completely neutralized that Xerneas that thought it got a bit, it was more safe next to that Volcarona, but maybe Jean-Paul got a bit too greedy in that turn, perhaps.
It's a tough call, because I think that Jean-Paul has a very identifiable win condition as long as the Volcarona remains on the field as well. It's not like he needed both the Xerneas and the Volcarona to win, but I think now that the Xerneas has been removed from the field, he just has to be ever the more careful with the Volcarona. And fortunately, Amoonguss being that last Pokemon means that you do have access to the same redirection and sleep capabilities that you'd want to use to protect the Xerneas in previous situations, but another Behemoth Blade could easily take that away. It depends how much damage this is going to do.
Yeah, as it, of course, targets into the Amoonguss, but it does not pick up the KO, which means the Amoonguss is more than free to get that Spore off, and now the Zacian is forced to sleep, at least up until the next turn is over due to its guaranteed turn of sleep. So, in this situation, Gabby, even though Shohei is 4 up versus Jean-Paul's 2, that Amoonguss may be troublesome, but of course it is at such a low HP range.
It is, but the Volcarona is going to be faster still, thanks to the Quiver Dance, and it is going to have access to Heat Waves. So very much like we saw in Game 2, it does come down to whether or not these Heat Waves connect, and if so, are they enough to pick up the KO on Incineroar, for example, after 2 turns? I don't think it'll be able to knock out Incineroar this turn, but if Heat Wave connects with both these Pokemon and puts them within KO range next turn, Jean-Paul is still very much in this game.
Oh my lord, they really are, as Zacian will take its guaranteed turn of sleep, and we've got the Pollen Puff reveal. Oh wow, so that means, of course, that may be very close to the range of picking up a KO onto the Incineroar, but I think, honestly, Shohei's win condition, for me personally, does seem to be this Incineroar having that safety goggles. You need to try to focus down, not take that much damage from the Volcarona. So switching it in right there may prove to be a bit costly, as you have lost a lot of that extra HP you may have needed.
You also gain access to Fake Out, though, and that's going to be critical in your second win con, which is Zacian waking up and getting an attack.
Oh, here we go. Shohei knows what they're doing. They go for the Behemoth Blade. They pick up the KO onto the Amoonguss. And what do you know? We have a 4 versus 1 scenario versus this Volcarona. And it's not looking too good for Jean-Paul. But then again, is this Volcarona capable of going ahead and winning this game for Peru and propelling themselves straight forward to the top 16?
I mean, we've seen Protect, we've seen Rage Powder, we've seen Quiver Dance, and we've seen Heat Wave. So you know that Volcarona is going to be forced to rely on Heat Wave for damage for the remainder of this game. And Shohei, given that he still has access to 2 Pokemon with Fake Out, all he has to do is, you know, protect the Zacian, maybe deal damage or otherwise roll a knockout on this Incineroar to get a second Fake Out user in, and then again continue to go on the offensive. It's going to take a few turns, I think, for Shohei to maneuver into a position where he can clean up, given Volcarona's relative speed to everything on his side of the field, and given how he needs a Fake Out user next to Zacian, or maybe even just the Landorus next to Zacian could do it. But it's going to be a tough call. It is not a comfortable win condition because the Volcarona is faster and because those Heat Waves are going to be doing so much damage to both these Pokemon. As it looks like we have another win condition making an appearance for Shohei as well, since there are only 3 minutes left in this game.
Yeah, they really are, but I think Shohei does have to take into consideration their Your time still available, so that might not be the case. They still have to play quite quickly. They do not want to run out of time and lose in such a manner, as Zacian does switch out now for the Rillaboom. This may be adding a bit more recovery for the Volcarona, but of course the main important thing is to not allow it to pick up KOs left, right, and center on all of your Pokemon if you are Shohei, as the Landorus does go for the Protect. And once again, Volcarona opts to go for the Heat Wave and does pick up a KO now onto this Rillaboom. Doesn't miss, but this may not be the best situation, as Incineroar is a very free switch-in right now.
Yep. And then Fake Out onto the Volcarona will flinch it, and then even if John Paul goes for a Protect on the Volcarona, you still have the timer condition as well for Shohei's win. Now, Volcarona is capable of getting 2 knockouts against these Pokemon if it has the opportunity to land an attack, and that would even up the score, at which point it would go down to, you know, how much HP is remaining on both these Pokemon. So it's a very close game. I think there's going to be one decisive turn after this turn, unless Shohei just goes for that damage and is able to protect the Landorus with a substitute. It's been so long, I honestly forgot that this Landorus even had access to it, but substitute will guarantee with the, I think, 1 or 2 turns remaining that this Landorus will not be knocked out, and as a result, Shohei securing the win condition, really, again, leaving it down to the wire.
I love it. I love the way Shohei's been playing. We have Heat Wave coming out right now. Not enough to pick up a KO on this Incineroar. Sure, the substitute has now been broken, but knowing Shohei, he might even... Oh, no, he doesn't. I was going to say he might go for another substitute. He goes for the Earth Power. He deals damage, and the Flare Blitz comes out from the Incineroar. Of course, targets down the Volcarona and picks up the much-needed KO onto that Volcarona. And guess what, ladies and gents? Shohei still has allowed Japan to be in with a chance to this World Cup. It is not doubt, it is not over. They still can do this, and Shohei has been waving that flag around, showing, leading the way essentially.
That was such an insane game three. Like coming down to it, to have a game two that was decided by those heat wave misses, essentially. I mean, there were certainly other things that came into factor, but I like to point out the random factors in this situation in particular. To come down to a game three where it was just up to the wire, back and forth the entire time, just goes to show you how talented these players are. And it's unfortunate for Jean Paul that he just wasn't able to find that opening he was looking for. I think Shohei did a fantastic job adjusting how he played that game three, relying more on switching and fake outs to buy time and to, play his way around the Volcarona and this switching on John Paul's side of the field. Just a very well played game. That was super exciting to watch.
It honestly was. I think it was one of my most favorite sets I've witnessed and had the pleasure to cast over, especially for the World Cup. I mean, you just see how much experience, knowledge, understanding, adaptability, and repositioning that both of these trainers have been able to absolutely show off to us, and it's just been an amazing set. Jean Paul playing exceptionally well throughout. At some point I felt like even in game two, a bit even in game three, that they still had the advantage, but slowly yet surely Shohei was able to bring that back to the point where they just ran out with it. They ran out with a win, and they're still in with a chance.
Yep. That's exactly right. And it goes to show you as well that you can't count Japan out of the count
No.
either, as they've kept their tournament life alive, excuse me. I think the stars have to align a little bit to give them the opportunity to move on to the next stage, as it's not just up to the performance of their team, but I think that they are one of the strongest regions present in the world for Pokemon, and this is exactly why you can't count them out.
100%. I mean, I completely agree with that. But of course, ladies and gents, what this will mean is we're going to cut to a very short break where we will be back with the fourth and final match of today, which is going to be streamed right here in a few minutes between Italy and Singapore. We've got Flavio versus Melvin K. Don't go anywhere. It's going to be another spicy set.